What people thought the future would look like in the late 1980s. RoboCop, starring Peter Weller, Nancy Allen, Ronny Cox, Kurtwood Smith, Miguel Ferrer, and directed by Paul Verhoeven. The late 80s sci-fi action film about a cyborg police officer is held up as a classic for the decade. Paul Verhoeven's unique, almost satirical look at the excesses of capitalism is an interesting time capsule to watch today. The action and special effects still hold up for a movie turning 30. It encapsulates much of the style of rated R movies made in the 80s. But with its over-the-top violence, when should kids watch the movie? The movie gets its R rating for its over-the-top gruesome violence in a few scenes. RoboCop isn't a gory bloodfest, but the deaths that do happen on screen leave an impact. I was probably too young to watch the film initially because of how Murphy's death still sticks with me to this day. The sadistic way the villains play with Murphy before killing him leaves a mark. I think some kids older than 10 could handle this scene, but it would be on a case-by-case basis. Anyone over 12 probably won't blink an eye at it, and maybe with some of the violence in other mediums today, the death wouldn't affect kids as much. It still sticks out in my mind and is one reason I would hesitate in letting kids watch RoboCop. The few other deaths in the movie are also violent, and the villain played by Kurtwood Smith is brutal and horrid. He is over the top, but Verhoeven wanted him to be. The film is as much about excess as it is about a cyborg cop trying to find its humanity. The violence and how it is portrayed was a deliberate choice by Verhoeven. Most of his films have an over-the-top take on a story. This excess works great for the movie, just not for letting kids watch. There is also bad language in the film, but nothing to great excess or anything to limit kids from watching. There is an attempted rape in the film along with some brief nudity. The rape scene goes back to the violence and would be a reason to limit when kids should watch. The few glimpses of breasts and butts found in the other parts of the movie isn't enough to be restricting. They are just body parts shown in a movie. Verhoeven is fond of putting casual nudity scenes in his films. One of the best examples of this is the shower scene found in Starship Troopers. Maybe the brief glimpses of nudity don't add anything to RoboCop, but he did show women getting dressed in the same locker room as men. I think even in this he was trying to say, hey, we're all just people with body parts. Don't be weird about it. I could be reading way too much into the 5 seconds of nudity found in the film, but with later examples found in his movies, I don't think it's too much of a stretch. Regardless, the language in nudity isn't a deterrent on when to let kids watch. It's solely the violence which would be limiting. The story for RoboCop on the surface is easy to understand. A cop gets killed by a group of thugs. The company brought in to run the police force uses the body of the cop to create a cyborg police officer who is nearly invulnerable. He is Iron Man without any emotion, at least at first. The ultimate bad guys are the evil corporation who is only out for the money or to gain power, and they try to get as much as they can anywhere possible. They don't care if Murphy still has his memories or what bringing him back to life would do to him. The interesting science fiction part of the movie deals with Murphy's ability to remember his past, even though his memories were supposedly wiped clean. He can remember his death and his family, but little else it seems. RoboCop struggles to find his humanity to a small degree in the story. It isn't delved into heavily, but the theme is there underneath the 80s excess of capitalism and where they thought at the time everything was going. The actual story of the movie is no barrier for enjoyment. The movie can be watched as a fun popcorn action science fiction film, but like many Verhoeven movies, it has layers. Again, I might be reading too much into his work, but I've got respect for what he tried to do with his over-the-top films. This is a story that can be enjoyed just about by anyone. It's the violence which would make me hold off on showing the film to kids. I think anyone 12 or 13 and older can probably enjoy the movie and not be scared off by the murders and violence found in the film. Any younger than this, and I think some of the gruesome murders would leave a mark. The special effects might also be a barrier for a modern audience, but I still think they hold up remarkably well for today's standards. The practical effects on RoboCop are top-notch. The miniature usage is notable, but it doesn't detract from the story, and I think teens today won't mind. RoboCop is a great action movie that still can be enjoyed and should be introduced to new audiences. Comment and let me know when you would let your kids watch RoboCop. When was the first time you saw it, and do you think you were too young? Like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Thanks for watching.